All right. So if you could tell us your name and your school and your school district.
Sure, my name's Jay O'Neill. My school was formerly known as Stonewall Jackson Middle School. The new name is yet to be determined. And I work for Kanawha County Schools in West Virginia.
Great. And can you tell a little bit about that name change of your school?
Yeah, it was built in 1940 as a high school, and it had shifted to a middle school, I think, in 99. And so it's not even the same school it was built at, but the name was never changed. It was just called Stonewall Jackson Middle. And there have been pushes. I think the most recent was maybe 5 years ago before this to get the name changed, and it never really went anywhere. But this summer, after George Floyd and all the Black Lives Matter kind of movement came together, really it started with, I think, with some local pastors and some community members got together and said, like, enough is enough. We got to do something about this. So they held meetings and kind of brought people together. They did a big march where they marched. I was part of it, from a church down to the Board of Ed building. The faculty senate at our school got together and decided to vote unanimously in favor of supporting them with the name change. And it was just a powerful thing. Everybody came together. So at the school board meeting, I think just a little, my timeline's all messed up this summer. I think just a little over a week ago, they held a vote on it, and there were about 150 or 200 people outside, with signs and everything, and unanimously voted to change the name. We don't know the new name yet. They're still determining that, but it's a really big positive. This school has the highest percentage of African-American kids at a middle school in the entire state of West Virginia. And it's also the only middle school named after a Confederate general. So this needed to happen a long time ago, and so I'm really glad it did.
Yeah, that's like a welcome and bit of good news during a really horrible time, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's great to hear. It sounds like the depth of community support on all types of levels, like the faculty senate, the pastors,
Yeah.
that's just a really cool thing. So that's great. Now, could you also tell us, before we get started any further, on just what your union affiliation is?
Yeah. So I'm a member of the WVEA, West Virginia Education Association, and our local is called the Kanawha County Education Association.
Great, thank you. And so our first question about this Workers on the Frontlines interview has to do with kind of asking about, when was the moment when you realized that this COVID-19 pandemic was really going to impact your school district and the schools in your county in particular? Do you remember, maybe not even a moment, but do you remember when it kind of hit you that this was not something that was far away? It was really going to impact your day-to-day lives and the day-to-day lives of your students and your coworkers.
Yeah, it's funny because I had kind of a different experience. We had a really early spring break this year that started March 6th. So I was actually on spring break when it kind of hit me that this was going to be something. In fact, I was traveling to another part of the state, and we were supposed to be having, actually, as a side note, like, I ran for state union president. I didn't win, but this year. But part of what I was doing was trying to travel around and meet with people across the state that week in my spring break. And we were supposed to have a meeting that Thursday, the 12th, I think, in Wheeling. And by then it was already feeling like people were getting nervous, things weren't going well. And so we decided to cancel that. And I went ahead and came home. And then the next day is when our governor got on and said, school is, from now on, it's going to be remote on that Friday. So we'd already been out a week longer than that with spring break. But that's that week of travel. Every day I'm kind of like, I'm around the state in different places, and I'm like listening to the news and hearing things, and we're trying to do these meetings, and it's just growing. And I don't know if there's one moment, but it was over those few days when it hit me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when Governor Justice made that announcement that things were going virtual, how did that roll out at your school and your district level, or how didn't it roll
Oh my
out?
gosh, it was a hot mess. We already utilize like an online platform a little bit. Honestly, for at least for me, more for like grading. than a lot of other stuff. I would try to put stuff up there if kids were absent or things, but so we just kind of tried to shift everything to that. I was in a funny situation because my wife had a lot of COVID symptoms. And so we were trying to, because we had, long story, we'd been skiing at a place in West Virginia that had a ton of out-of-state people. So it like seemed reasonable that possibly, she could really have it. So we were trying hard to get her tested. We finally got her test, but the results didn't come back for 8 or 9 days. So during that time, I called my principal. I was like, hey, like, I don't really know if I should come in to the building, because they were still trying to have teachers come in at first. And he said, yeah, you shouldn't come in, just stay home and work from home, which I don't know what I would have done in the building anyway. So it was fine. I will say that it was interesting, the rollout, because at first they were kind of trying to have us like maintain like office hours, and be available for students. I think they were saying every day at 9 a.m. and put all this work up. And really they scaled a lot of that back. I teach middle school, and they quickly realized like there's no middle school students up at 9 a.m. Like nobody's like all the teachers were like, I'm logged on, no one ever says anything. So they pulled that back. And then I think honestly we were giving too much work. It was a lot at once. There was a lot of anxiety, and a lot of families were saying, oh my gosh, my kid has an hour's worth of assignments from each teacher every day. And so they really had us pull all that back, which helped on my end too, because it was really difficult shifting a lot of your work online. I teach West Virginia studies, which I love, but we're a small state, so there's not like a lot of online resources nationally for that. Where when I taught like US history, there's a ton of stuff you can pull from everywhere. With this, I was really kind of in trouble, honestly, trying to figure out, okay, what can I use, other than just like putting a reading online. It would be interesting. So it was a challenge. It got better, but it was rough at first.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So West Virginia studies sounds fascinating. What are some of the main things you teach in there?
It, it's
During
8th grade across the state here, and it's supposed to be like geography, civics, West Virginia history, that kind of thing. And at this point in the year, it was mostly I was teaching West Virginia history, and what was awful for me, it was like I was getting to my favorite part, which was like labor history, and then this breaks out. And so it struggled because I actually had some really good projects, but they were really kind of in-person group, like stuff that I could not figure out how to, transfer to online. So we just struggled through, did the best we could, I assigned a Mine Wars documentary, for instance. It's on PBS. I don't know how many of my kids actually watched it. You just did stuff like that, and we did our best. It was rough.
and how did the county deal with the fact that schools are often a place where students get a lot of their meals, get a lot of other supplemental services, mental health services? How did that all work during this virtual learning time? Were there like food distribution sites, or how did that
Yeah,
roll
I'll
out?
give our county credit. That seemed to, from everything I understand and what I heard, the food seemed to go really well. It took them a few days, maybe even a week, to kind of get it figured out. But basically, they prepared kind of like, I think at first it was bag lunches, and they were doing it almost every day. And then they decided this is really tricky. So they prepared like a week's worth of food in kind of a box, and then they distributed it to students and their families at various bus like pickup locations across the county. So basically wherever kids were getting picked up for the school bus, they just ran that route, the bus drivers did, with food. And they knew at a certain time of day like what time it would be there. We kind of have like an all call system in our county, so parents would get a call every week saying, okay, and I think they tried to do the same time, it'll be on on this day at this location, so make sure somebody's out there. And I think that worked pretty well, especially considering how quickly they threw it together. Mental health services and things, I don't know as much. I know we tried to check in with our students kind of once a week, whether it's by email, whether it's by phone call, all that. It was hard to reach some of them for sure. I'm not a special ed teacher or anything. I don't know how all that went. I know our counselor was doing a lot of that too. And again, mixed results. It's hard enough sometimes to get a hold of families during the school year. So this made it tricky, but they tried. I felt like, honestly, I really did feel like people did the best they could do considering how quickly we were thrown into this situation.
For sure. And I'm curious, in that two plus months that you all were mostly virtual, is there a particular moment that sticks out, whether with a student, a parent, or even a coworker, just as like a memorable moment of like what you were going through, something that, whether it was yeah, I don't even know how to classify it. It's just a memorable moment. Is there any memorable moments that you had other than, I guess, not being able to do your favorite part of your West Virginia studies course
Yeah,
and
I
stuff?
mean, a couple of things. One, it was nice, like, and a lot of this was just via like email, but it was nice how I felt like students and their families opened up a little more. Like we almost got to know each other. It's funny, we weren't in person, but we got to know each other a little better because we were talking more about what was going on with their family or food needs or things like that. And when you tried to check in with them, they would actually talk a little bit more about those issues, which was nice. I also remember just having staff meetings via Zoom, which was pretty weird. And honestly, it was pretty nice. Because I mean, we all know how staff meetings are, and there's always those people that just have all kinds of questions that don't relate to anything. So it was nice to be on Zoom, and I really like checking my email and doing other stuff while I'm sitting through that. So yeah, it was weird, it was strange. It looks like we may be doing this again this fall, but you know.
Yeah, with those staff meetings, and it always seems to be the staff meetings that have already gone over a half an
Yes.
hour where there'll be silence for about 10 seconds and the principal says, "Are there any other questions?"
And then yeah.
And then inevitably, yeah, no, that I could see that being a huge help actually. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Zoom. Um, and I guess, yeah, I only have one more question, which is kind of a biggie, which is the fall, or really a month from now, and how the school's reopening thing. What do you foresee as the biggest challenges? What do you think is even going to happen? I mean, are you going to start virtually? I know you mentioned some districts in West Virginia are going to start virtually. Um, and I guess even most importantly, what do you think needs to happen for you all to be able to safely go back? What are some of the things that you think should be kind of non-negotiable for people to return to in-person schooling?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. We've had a lot of conversations, and there's been a lot of kind of like, okay, I look at my daily routine, how's that going to look under COVID? And it's been overwhelming because, oh my gosh, just so many questions, from like little things like, are we going to have the water fountains shut down? If so, are we providing bottled water? What are we doing about bathroom breaks? Oh, they've said they want all kids to wash their hands before lunchtime. Do you know how long that's going to take to cycle all the kids through the bathroom to get their hands washed? Like, oh, you're saying you only want 50% capacity in the cafeteria. Well, cool. We already run 3 lunches at my school, so that means we'll run 6. And with the time in between to clean, they're going to be eating from like 9:30 until like 2. Like it's so we start thinking about all this, and it just gets overwhelming. And I think the feeling I'm getting here and both nationally is just people need to say, we're not ready. We got to start virtually until we get this figured out. Also, like, COVID is kind of controlling everything right now. And because we as a country didn't do what we're supposed to do and get our case numbers down, like, you know, we have to be realistic about it and wait till it actually is safe to go back. I think some of the non-negotiables is, yeah, I mean, we need to see lower case levels in the surrounding area. And some parts of West Virginia are really rural. They may be fine to go back, with some precautions. I think mask wearing for me is like pretty mandatory. And they're kind of saying that, but as a teacher, you're already thinking, okay, but what do I do when the kid refuses to wear a mask? Like, what's the punishment? What's the discipline procedure for that? Can they stay in the room if they're not wearing a mask? Like, all the stuff that you think about as a teacher that I think they still need to work out. Another one is related to that. It's like ventilation systems. Like, my school was built in 1940. You know, it didn't have air conditioning when it was built. It was installed later. Mine just recycles air from my room. Like, the air intake is in the room. My windows, I think one opens, but we had to like wedge it open with a book. I mean, they're saying it's spread by aerosols. How are we going to ensure that fresh air is in there? There's all these things that I think they just haven't thought through. You know, another big one a couple other big ones I'm hearing a lot are, you know, what about sick days? Like, am I going to have to use my sick days well, first of all, if I get it and have to be out for 14 days, I mean, we only get 15 a year. A new teacher, that would like blow through everything they have. Or worse, what if I've come in contact with somebody and I have to be out and quarantined and maybe get tested? So I'm out those days until I find the test results. Let's say it comes back negative. So I haven't had it, but you've made, you know, so am I going to have to use my sick days for that? And we haven't gotten a clear answer. You know, teachers are supposed to have a duty-free lunch, but we're hearing a lot of times they may want kids to eat lunch in the classrooms to cut down on, you know, I guess cross-contamination or something. So, okay, great, but who's going to watch them then and stuff? So, and there's all these staffing needs and things they haven't thought about. And, you know, another thing I just saw this morning is like our local thing said, yeah, we're providing money to buy, and I think it's even going to individual schools. We're providing all the schools money to purchase PPE and equipment. I thought, you haven't bought it yet? Like, literally every single district in the entire country, possible world, is trying to buy these supplies. Like, are you kidding? So those kind of things, like, we need to know that stuff's there. We need to know there's a real plan. And honestly, we just need to see the cases lowered a lot before we even think about going in.
Yeah, definitely. The air circulation thing really speaks to me. You know, I taught in a classroom once that was designed to be like a special ed breakout room that they turned into a classroom for like 35 kids that had no windows, and that the air circulation didn't really work. And so it would get to like 85 degrees in there more than it should have. And I'm just thinking about, like, if they even tried to use that classroom, if one person had even a low viral load case, everyone would still get COVID, I think. Like,
Right.
it's just, if you don't have that ventilation, like, what, it's just, that's terrible. So,
Yeah. And
um,
so many, you know, so many schools across the country that's the case. So, you know, we need a real plan other than just do the best you can, which is what I feel like we're hearing, and that's not good enough.
definitely. And so that pretty much wraps it up. So before I pause recording, is there anything else you'd like to say before I pause the recording portion?
Yeah, I'll say this, and I maybe locking it in for posterity. I hope this is a moment where teachers like across the country kind of decide to stand up collectively and say, like, we're not returning till it's safe. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I hope this is a key moment.
Awesome. Thanks.